Hello, everyone. Welcome to this next episode of Data as the Fourth Pillar, the Board and CXO briefing with Sujay and Sidd. Today, we are very fortunate to welcome one of my childhood friend, Mrinal Prasad. So, Mrinal, I will let you introduce yourself. So, welcome to this show. Really happy for me to see you here.
Thanks for having me, Sujay. Good to see you again. We have known each other for so long that I don't even remember how long we have known each other. Uh, and you are always one of the smartest people I knew. So good to see that you're making other people smart by sharing your knowledge with everybody else as well. Hello, everyone. I am Mrinal Prasad. I'm one of the co-founders and co-CEO of Sarthee. It's a Sanskrit word, as some of you would know, which means the one who guides. Now, we are a data analytics company. But our entire purpose is to help organization move from collecting data to actually deciding with it. I'm a person who started as an analyst. I'm not a person who became a CDO or a CXO from the beginning. I'm the person who started my life coding, going through the spreadsheets, understanding analysis, getting lost into it in terms of how to explain what the data says, and then learning with my clients, with my seniors, how to really get to the real insight. So when we actually started the company, we had two things in the company, the name Sarthi, which is a guide. And if you go and look at our logo at the bottom, you'll see actionable insights, because that's what really matters. You need to be able to answer the why, how, what, not just what do I have. So thanks for having me, Sid and Sujay. Looking forward to this conversation.
Amazing, Brinal, and I mean your experience almost feels like this is going to be. I mean, this is for sure going to be a great conversation. But the way you put your introduction, I was thinking, Sujay, he almost laid the chapters of our book in that introduction, right? So wanted to get to know a little more, Mrinal, about Sarthi, but also if you could answer the question, because as you said, you're as the very nice name, like a guide, right? So I'm sure in that journey of Sarthi and yourself as well in the data field for several decades, you must be speaking with several C-suite leaders, right? And today we see that's the reason why Sujay and me at least want to champion data. We see it as at the same strategic level as people, process, and technology, right? So, A, want to get your perspectives on it, but more importantly, what do you think are some of the three reasons? Let's kind of pick the top three in your opinion why data is still not being seen by C-suite leaders as strategic as the other three pillars, and so wanted to understand what your perspectives on that.
Sure, Sid. This is a question that I'm very excited to answer. And why we live in the data world, but data is still not really being utilized. It's a question which we have been answering for decades now. And based on my experiences working with so many senior leaders, where data is important. It's not that people feel that we don't have to convince anybody more that data is important or not. People know data is important, but the first I would say start from the point is it's there, but it's not being utilized. Data is there. Like, think about it as like somebody who's sitting there patient, holding every answer that you would probably require, but nobody's asking the right questions. You have the data, it can answer almost every business need that we have today. But if you don't ask the question, it won't answer on its own. That's the first thing. So how do we go from thinking of data as like the challenge of as more about technology or a data problem to more of a conversation problem? You need to have a conversation with your data. And only when people understand how to talk to it and not treat it as a technology, then we'll start getting there. So that's the first thing I've seen. Like, we don't use it. It's there, don't use it. I would say the second is, even when it is used, the value is not always visible, measured, communicated. So people know data is important, but if you go and ask your C-suite, how much of your ROI in marketing was improved because of data? Like, how much did your churn reduce because of data? Nobody has that answer really. Or very few. I would say there are some organizations have seen some they are trying to do, but if you use something and you don't measure it, then it effectively becomes something like, how do you justify it? how do you, so it becomes a fad. People will do it, but you want something to be sustainable, it needs to get funded. For it to get funded, it has to be show value that is measured and communicated. So a lot of times companies have used data sometimes to reduce their waste, improve efficiency, but they themselves are not aware that it's because of the data. So you need, and probably that leads to the third answer where I would go is you don't have a single owner as a champion. I, as a CEO of a company, I'm looking at my overall growth. If there is an issue, I am responsible for it. If my marketing is not generating enough leads, my CMO would be responsible. If the technology deployment is not happening, if my website is not up, there's a person to whom you can go and say, you are responsible for it. So we always have people who are responsible to decide, to basically build the vision, implement it, and ensure that it's helping the organization. What misses on the data side is that one person who owns that. One person you can go to for everything that is there. It's almost like what Steve Jobs used to say, right? The way he was able to build Apple, because for every decision, everything was finally owned by one person. There was no groups. But when you have a data issue, it's a marketing issue, it's a sales issue, it's a technology issue, and that's where it gets lost. So I would say these things: use the data that you have, measure and communicate its value, and then have somebody who owns it. The buck stops with that person. And if you do those three things, the value that you would get out of data will be far more exponential and sustainable as well.
Yeah, very interesting insights, Mrinal. I think I would like to share my perspective on all the 3 points. First point you said is very important, that data is, if I could interpret, you're saying it is a part of the fabric of the organization, right? It's embedded within the fabric, and every individual or stakeholder or business function needs to go and talk to the data. I totally buy into that. Really nice way to put it. Now, when you come to the second point, the value, in our book as well, we have attempted to share the value. But I have another perspective. It's a part of your existence, the reason of your existence, and reason of your everyday execution of delivery of business value. So should that question be even asked on data? Why should it be need to be justified from a defensive side? Right, okay, show me the value, prove me the value. So that's the second point. More, I'm saying, in our book as well, we have tried to capture the value, but sometimes I keep asking myself, is this a valid question to ask? Why should we be defensive on that point?
Align with you, Sue. And I think the way we would say, it's not, we should probably not defensive, but it's almost like every CMO I try to talk to, they say, how much leads did we generate? They always go back to their CEO that, look, this is the lead I'm generating. The sales officer goes and says, this many sales I got, this much of revenue I generated. Like, the data should not be treated as a side activity. It's the core business, to your point. The data is no more a cost center. It's a values creation center. And that's how it should be treated.
No, just wanted to complete that thought, because I think it's a good discussion ongoing. So to your point, Sujay, yes, at one hand we should not be looking at it from a defensive standpoint, but what would be really good is what Mrinal said as one of the challenges, right? That a lot of data is there in organizations, but they're not tapping into it. So if you combine that with the value statement, every C-suite leader should be then, or at least the data leader in the organization should be looking at what is the opportunity I have to activate that data, right? So where all can that data that I have collected or lying in somewhere in a database or wherever, where all can I deploy that? That is probably more the value statement Mrinal is alluding to, and I totally adhere to that, because otherwise you're just having a lot of information captured, but it's just sitting, and then the cost question will come, right? Whether it's data or whether it's technology or people working on the data, that question is going to come.
An example I would give is like one of the metrics we use to evaluate ourselves, like every Sarthi and even in our team members, is we are an analytics company. We don't measure based on how much revenue we are creating for Sarthi or how many models we built. We always measure in terms of what was the ROI of the customer for every dollar they spent with us. And as the clients have gotten more trust on us, they see that, okay, this is a company which always worries about it. So we don't look at, oh, we have an SRW and we are working, we are great. We always look, is that dollar value or not? So it becomes easy from me as a partner in this company to go to the talk to the client, because I actually joke, the less you give me, the less you get back. The more you give me, the more, because I'll give you a multiple. So if you spend $1 million with me, maybe you get 20 million back. You spend 2 million with me, I'll give you 40, 50 million back. So that's the way we talk more on the positive value that the data generates for them. But agree with Sujay. This is not the era to justify why the data is needed or be defensive about it. It's more like we are the value addition to this organization. Truth being, if you're not a data driven organization, it's no more a question of growth. It's a question of survival, because everybody else is behaving better and better with every passing day.
Yeah, and exactly, Minal. And this question also comes because that data is not treated as part of your operating model, that you are treating like people, process, tech. You're thinking data is another entity, hence I need to justify. But once you start behaving like it is people, process, tech, and data, then you do not bring those questions up. Yes, you need to capture value from every part, from your processes, from your people, from your technology, similar for big data. But that should not be a precursor to approve investments. That's the point I wanted to bring
Yeah,
in, right?
that I completely agree. We are way past that point.
Yes. Exactly. And the third point, you talk about the ownership of data. Yes, there should be a chief data officer like a chief HR officer in every organization, but organization could learn from how the people pillar is treated. Even though there is a chief HR officer, your people in your organization is not like owned by the chief HR officer. He or she is just laying down the principles, the guiding operating rhythm to help the people deliver higher value in the organization, right? Similarly, as you have been saying in all your examples, everybody's business is data and everybody delivers value from data. However, there is a chief data officer to lay out all the governing principles and ensure that that data as one of the levers of your operating model is maximized.
And such a, I would even allude to that it's not just an owner, but also the decision maker, like other CXOs. Like just like you have your other CXOs who are responsible owners, decision makers for their respective areas. Data should not be treated as a subgroup within either technology, where it a lot of time lies, or sales and marketing, which is driving the investment for that group. It needs to be treated as a core foundational principle of every organization.
Yep. True.
Which brings to an interesting point, Pranal. So if we take that and apply that to Sarthi, maybe you can explain how you set this up.
You're basically making me vulnerable now. Yeah, but true, right? Like I think to your point, you're an analytics firm, so typically, like everybody will assume that everything is data, like everything is data driven. Very honest, not always, but yes, most of the time. Like we are a very, very data oriented organization. And we were data oriented even when we were a startup. Day one, when we started capturing everything from there possible at that point of time. We started streamlining our tech stack so that we are able to measure down the line. We were already planning what will happen 5 years down the line. We were capturing every applicant's data that we think would be valuable. We were at measuring when they join their performance. We are measuring the metrics on which they're going to evaluate. And it has helped us tremendously. It has tremendously helped us. We are obviously a very people driven organization. What we do depends, obviously, we have our processes, technology, but at the end of the day, it's a very human driven organization. So being able to measure has helped us tweak how we want to mentor people, guide them, move them in the right direction. And I would say that for a smaller organization, probably like, we are not enterprise, maybe a mid market or even SMBs that you talk about, I think they need to start with small decisions. They don't have to go and build a whole architecture, build a data lake. They start with what is it that we want to drive. In our case, we knew that finally three things will matter, and which matters for whether small, big, does enterprise level Fortune 100 companies. The first and foremost is trust. Do you rely on the data that you have or not? So we created a very good mechanism of data capture, data cleanup from the very, very beginning, so that we know that where the data is coming from. We have lineage of the data. We exactly know who captured it, when it was captured, so that we can trust the data that we are getting. The second is, once we started doing it, it's not just about building things. It's very important to have adoption. So onboarding other people from very early on. Well, again, I'll go back to the people cases. We obviously use in finance sales, but I'll take the people case here. Is we shared why we are doing it with our team members. We explained to them that this is how we'll do it 3 years down the line. We were not even there, but in the very beginning, we explained this is our vision. This is what we have done. We have worked for larger organizations, and we know we'll be there in 3 to 5 years and we'll use it. So we started capturing information around applicants, academic background, their interview performances, when they join in, their initial probation period, how they're ramping up, how they're getting classified within the first 6 months in the organization, kept on measuring the performance. And then later on, when we started measuring, data automatically start popping up. Like things like those who performed really well in the first 6 months tend to be the best performers. Your lead matters. If you pair somebody with a high performing lead, there's a correlation to the performance of the people who are in the team. And like funny thing started popping up was people who take planned leaves, more structured leaves, not the number of overall leaves, but people who are more planned tend to grow more. And we went back and deep dove into it, but it was always started with the goal was we want to build a high performance driven organization. So we worked backward to say, what is the reliable data we can? How do we make sure that everybody starts adopting it, understanding the measurement, and then the value? As we were able to show the value to the organization, to the leadership, to say that, look, here is how we have been measuring. This is how we are tweaking our induction program, our recruitment program, our mentorship program in the organization. And look how consistently the performance of the organization is going up. Like one thing which we really pride ourselves in is, this is something which multiple clients have repeated, which is they have said, we can imagine Sarthee doing everything else that their competitors do, but we can never imagine the competitors do everything that Sarthee does. And that is only possible when you have a great team. Cannot be done by one founder, two founders. It has to be a great team. And the team can only be built when you have performance measurement, you mentor them well, and you train them in the right direction using data. So we couldn't have been here without like utilizing data in our organization.
Yeah, it's a good example of data becoming the true differentiator for you, how you started it. I think in the analytics space, it was easier and better for you because you have that data mindset. But Mrinal, if you take your customer's perspective and maybe different segments, you can take large, medium, and small. How do you see their notion or importance of data? And as you said, in data has been important. How have been they treating data? Because Sid and I have worked with large organizations. They say data is so critical for each business process. But whenever the data team finally at the end of the year, they need to justify themselves to the CFO organizations for their budgets. Again, coming back to the first point, there's a lot of talk about or understanding that data is important. But when it comes to hard budget approvals and the finance teams then asking, okay, show me the money, right? So how do you see this playing out in a customer's environment? Have you seen a change over the last few years? And you can take it from a segment of customers as well.
So it has evolved. It has definitely evolved from a place where like you had to justify even things like data engineering, a couple of decades back. Why do you need a data lake or data asset to time where people are worried about putting data on cloud? So things have definitely, it's a lot more comfort level that is there. But yes, even within data, right, there's organizations have a lot of different needs. So you still have to justify why this initiative versus that initiative should be funded. That is always there. And what I have seen is where it becomes easier is where data people don't talk data. Like, a lot of times we get into analysis paralysis. We start sharing a lot of information as to this has been done. I think what we need to do is the language should be outcome based language. That's what I've seen works a lot with. It's very easy to go to a CMO and effectively say that I'm going to bring your acquisition cost down by X%. Or with the same marketing dollars, I will increase your leads by Y%. Or if you're going to a sales head and say, I'm going to increase your close rates. Or a call center, I'm going to increase your contact rates. You dial so many, not everybody talks to you. So the moment you start talking in terms of a metric that relates to you, it's almost like, I'll take this person, Sandeep Tyagi. He was the CEO of the company I started as an analyst with, was my boss, my mentor. And one of the first thing he taught me was the most important question in any presentation is, who's the audience? So if you have to speak in the language of the audience, not your language. And that's what people have to do. So that's the first thing that I've seen you need to communicate. I would say the second would be, you need to pick up your battles. You can't be doing everything. So you have to go and look at all the potential initiatives and start saying, what is the value? How much value is this really going to generate? The second thing is the data ready? You might have a great idea, but if it's going to take 3 years to implement, 4 years to implement, you're not really right there. So the readiness, the time to impact, and then what are the risks associated with it? That's a very important planning that you need to do at the beginning. So you are very clearly communicating, this is what I'll drive. You're aware that it's feasible or not, and you're aware of risk. You don't want to go and overcommit without knowing that. So if you are focused, you'll drive more value. And then just as a very beginning said, define your ROI in very, very plain terms. Don't say this decile, that decile. Just say your churn will reduce by 2%. Just have that metric, something which the leadership can understand and around which your whole organization can rally. 3, 4 big items, that is the goal. Depending upon the size of the organization, it could be a quarterly goal, it could be annual goal, but the goal should drive the whole initiative. And once you have done that, everything, don't report status. That's the last final thing I've seen people report status. Data people don't report status. Data people give scorecard. This is what I have expected to do. This is where I am. This is a confidence I have that I'm going to finally achieve the goal. That mentality shift from going from here is where the report to say here's how we are performing. Almost like professional teams. They measure, I want to win the World Cup. This many games I've won. This is what we are going to win, and this is how we'll win the World Cup, is the way we need to think about our data initiatives.
Awesome. I mean, really insightful, Mrinal. I wanted to go back. So maybe Sujay and me are playing tag team to pull you in different directions. I want to go back to Sarthee again, because when you were explaining about some of the metrics and some of the way you are doing it in a data driven fashion, as you said from day one, I wanted to get two further deep dives on that perspective. One, more from the people who are joining Sarthi, maybe the first initial set of people, because the resistance I have seen from speaking with a few leaders for SMBs or mid market is, I want to first get my product market fit, or if I first want to get my key objectives done. Data can be an afterthought, or it can be when we are a little bit more mature. Secondly, the people also joining the company are expecting, let's say, a startup kind of mentality, right? So when you suddenly say we're going to capture so much data, we're going to do this in a very data driven, process oriented fashion, wouldn't that be resistance? In that sense, how do you also make sure they are following the process, but all at the same time having the freedom to experiment and do things beyond? So how do you get that balance in place?
I think I would go back to what Sujay alluded in the very beginning, right? You don't have to justify. I think we are far away from that point where you need to be defensive about that. But to all the smaller organization, I always say you don't have to invest that heavily, right? It's not that that becomes your predominant at that point of time, but the reality is that will become your differentiator. If not today, tomorrow it will become your differentiator. It's a strategic advantage. It's not a cost, or you can do or may do. It is a strategic advantage. So if you understand that it is a strategic advantage, like if you look at the success rate of, again, going back to the example, the people we hire, that itself is a great measure that didn't have the mindset. When we started, we built a 5-year roadmap as to what are the skill sets people would learn, and we tracked people on that.
Right.
Again, it was easier for me because I come from a data background. Before I started, I had worked at senior level in other organizations. I had advised clients, so I knew the data. But the advice to all the other smaller companies who are out there who are starting or small at this stage, think of it as a strategic advantage. If something is a strategic advantage, you're going to invest time on that. So you will do. That's the first thing. For the people who join in, a lot of times you think that when you build processes or when you're trying to get data, it's very bureaucratic. That's not necessarily the case, right? It's you have to break that myth. Like it's if it is a habit, I think Sujay, you mentioned that it's a habit. So if you make it a habit, it's always happening. You won't even notice that you're doing it. Right? It only when you do one off that it becomes more like, oh, why do I have to do this? But if it becomes a habit and you're consistently showing people why we are doing it, that why is very important also, then there won't be resistance. And but again, our whole purpose of doing this is Sarthee guide. Obviously we are guide to our clients. We always use the catch line that everybody gives you an army of soldiers. We come with the guide, and that differentiates. But the guide is also internal. We are the Google Maps of future for our juniors. We tell them how to go from point A to point B on the most optimized way. I cannot take my team from point A to point B in the most optimized path if I have not measured those paths, if now I'm not found out, and I'm also real time not tracking where the traffic is going to be bad. So
Yep.
we also revolve with time. We are not stuck that this is a path, go ahead. We always evolve with time. So in short, I would say think of data as your strategic advantage. And just like you invest in all your other strategic initiatives, this is a strategic initiative. And for the team, don't be defensive. People understand their value. I'm pretty sure all our members check their likes and everything. So this generation is much easier to work with.
Yeah. And very rightly said, Mrinal, and good that Sid you brought it up. It's very critical. I think Sid, you brought a very point that's the mentality of many companies is, oh, we have to collect data to improve it. That's become a justification. When you think that data is part of your fabric and way of working, then you do not need to justify that is part of your habit, like Minal, like you said. And that's a key mindset shift that is needed for many leaders who are starting up and going and developing their companies, that it's not about a process to capture data and use data. It's a way of working, way like you are working with your people, like you're executing your processes. That's how you leverage and benefit from data. And Minal, talking about the advantage, strategic advantage, Sid and I, during the course of writing our book, we had an interview with a small and medium sized company, a payment provider. And a payment providers works on 2% margin, 1% margin, right? So, and he was the CEO. So we asked her, how do you differentiate also? He says, I differentiate through data. So whenever I go to the retail merchants, it's not we're providing payment as a service, we are providing brand intelligence as a service. We tell you in your store which customers are walking in with which brand likes and dislikes. So we are more like your revenue enhancer rather than just a payment provider. So that's another example of how you can leverage data to build that strategic advantage. And I'm sure many organizations have their own examples like you have, Minal, within Sarthi, right?
It's like it's embedded everywhere. Even like our lead gen does A/B testing all the time, and it's always set from the very beginning. We didn't have to become a $10 billion company to have the full marketing automation tech stack to do that. So we designed our campaigns, messaging, what works, what does not work, who sends the message, does that personalization help? And that has been helping us fine tune our lead generation. So we are a data company. So here's point, Sujay, there is so much of value generation that you do that cost justification is no more a scenario that anybody should be worried about.
And if you are asking about cost justification, it gives a pointer that maybe you are not thinking data as part of the fabric. Hence, this question gets asked, right?
So true.
Very interesting, Mrinal. I want to take this conversation because I think this is a very, very important for our C-suite listeners to also maybe practically see some of these points in action. So if it's okay, I'm just going to put put you a bit to the test. I'll give you some leeway though. So maybe let's pick any industry. I want to take a specific example and see how we can really bring that also with your Sarthi experience, right? Like guide how our C-suite should go about it. So let's pick any industry of your choice. Let's take a company which is say enterprise in nature. So they are around for a couple of decades at least. Maybe they are in that category who hasn't yet seen data as a strategic. So if I'm a, let's say, a CEO in that company, so what are some of the 2, 3 first things I need to do? You can choose your industry and make it contextual. So
I think we can take any of the utilities, right? Very traditional businesses, they have grown in a very different way, a lot of growth through acquisitions. So it's a very disparate world where they have grown through a lot of acquisitions. Data could be disparate. And I have seen even in those, the value that can start getting created, like small changes can drive millions, specifically on the enterprise because they're so big. And if you don't understand what data to look at, then that becomes a challenge. I'll give you a couple of examples. Like, one of my client was struggling with call center. Like, they're making a lot of calls. They had a huge team, but the sales were not really going up. And the question was, how do we drive sales? That was the only question. And being a data person, I didn't want to go and say, okay, let's go and just build this model. So we actually spent 2 days in the call center talking to people there, trying to understand the whole flow, map the whole flow as to what happens. They create a lead list, the lead list gets loaded, the dialer dials, then they call, the call happens. Sometimes people don't pick up, they talk. Then the discussion happens, leads becomes opportunities becomes sales, and so on and so forth. So we went and mapped that whole thing, right? So as a CEO, if you're trying to do it, you need to understand the chess game. It's a game. It's a big game. It's not just one piece here. So where are your pieces? How are the pieces positioned? What position? What point of the game you are in? You need to understand that, and then you understand what to do with it. And this is one of the simplest projects we have ever done in the history of Sarthee. We went through it and we identified the biggest challenge was people don't pick up the phone. It was a B2B company. And the biggest challenge was when you're calling businesses, they have their own customers. If you call up a restaurant at 12 in the noon, they're not going to talk to you. I've seen enough number of restaurants that pick the phone, put it down at the best, and don't talk to you. On the reverse, you talk to a doctor at 1 p.m., they would be, because that's the break time. So we identified that 80% of the drop that was happening from their actual leads to the contact was because they never used to get to talk. So we evaluated that, built models, but finally, practical reality came with some basic rules around industry, around the size of the businesses, and all. Say, just change the timing of the call. That's all. You don't do anything else. Their contact rate jumped 2x. I was so worried around when we were doing the simulation that I went and told the client that your contact rate will jump by 35 to 40% because I was worried that my simulation is wrong. But when we actually implemented, that's what happened. So as a CEO, you need to understand your game, how the game is happening, where is it that we can have impact. And if you can do that particular thing properly, like one small thing, but imagine now you're getting double the leads by making a small tweak in the business. And that's the amazing part about data is small change here can have so much of downstream impact that the multiples become exponential. So that was an amazingly case where I was worried for the first time in my life that I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah. And Mrinal, what you said initially, which I really loved, go and talk to your data. So this data about different call times that was existing, right? You just went to talk to it and brought it upfront, right?
And the other extreme which I've seen is the process breaking, right? Like this was again it doesn't happen as much as now, but in the old era where direct marketing was really big, this is about some time back. When you send a mail, not everything gets delivered. So companies track the deliverability and then they suppress them. The process had broken. Somehow the feed was not coming in. And when we looked into it, we identified that everybody thought that is working, but it was not working. So you need to also check the health of your data, talk to it, and also say, how are you? So once we identified that was a $10 million impact. Just imagine a small process change which took them one day to fix was a $10 million impact for this client.
Yeah. And that's where data plays a role in each of the other aspects. We talk about the flywheel effect, Mrinal, Sid and I in the book, that data is by not itself, it is together with the people, process, and tech. Like the examples you have been giving, Minal, from the people side, you are leveraging data to improve the life or the productivity of the people. Similarly, in this example, like you talk process, again, data to improve the process, right?
On top of what Sujay said, in the people process or even tech perspective, I think in the examples you have given, what was important for me was, you're not picking up on just a single event or a single point. You're kind of looking at the patterns by probably aggregating, like the doctor example versus the restaurant example. It's not just you saw one such point. You would have seen multiple such points. Even in the example you mentioned, interestingly, about the vacation, how your employees plan, and you've seen a pattern based on that they are probably more successful, right? It's not just you are looking at one individual or employee or one particular point, right? So that's another important insight for leaders to look.
I think the leaders need to look at their own customer, understanding who their customers are. Just like you in the old era, you will go and talk to your customer. Now you have the data through which you can talk to your customer. So talk to your customer through the data that you already have. You are not just optimizing things, you're connecting to your customers. It will tell you things that sometimes customers themselves may not know. But if you really go through the data, it will talk to you, and it'll talk in the language of your customers.
Yeah. And I think, Minal, you take customer as one example, stakeholder base, but then you have been given
Yeah, like
examples
any
about your,
stakeholder, right?
yeah, any stakeholder, right? About your employees, you talked about how you're talking to employees, right?
Like anybody whom you service and anybody you work with has data.
Yeah.
Data, if you do it at an aggregate level, tells you a much better strategy, story, and takes away the noise when you're doing one-off. Completely true, sir.
Maybe just a final question from my side, at least on this utilities example. So let's say now they identified this one case where they found the value of data. So CEO says, yeah, now I really see the value. But how do I now, in the next phase of my journey, do it in a strategic way where I can identify with my business 10, 20, 100 points? And to your earlier point, let's should they appoint then a chief data officer to scale it out? How should the operating model, without going into depth, but at least the key points from an operating model work between these stakeholders?
And Minal, before you go forward, maybe I can chime into what Sid brought a very important point. So, did this success bring about a behavior change? That's what maybe Sid is alluding to.
It
Behavior change of the CXO who could feel, yeah, see, this is just not one-off case. I would change the entire paradigm of way of working of the organization and look into so many different potentials.
I won't say just that this one incident, because talking about enterprises, but there's so many use cases which kept on coming up that the culture has drastically shifted. Like from like a couple of decades ago, where it was all about just spend. It was all about we are growing, we are spending, let's spend, we'll get the return. To a
Mm.
stage where now they actually measure everything. They measure everything, they plan it out. In fact, they have invested heavily on marketing automation to basically ensure that the insights that is being generated is executed on scale. So from a point where it was almost like no measurement, to a place where they are investing heavily on not just on insights, but also how to implement it. It has definitely, there has been a paradigm shift. And in fact, in most of the clients I work with, they have all gone through this journey, and more as the success comes in, and nothing feeds in success like success, right? The more you feed it, the bigger it becomes, and that's what has been happening, Sujay. But yes, there is still concern, like right now what is happening with AI, right, where majority of them are failing. Like if you go and look at the statistics, and again the challenge that is happening is you need to have the right messengers who talk to your data, who talk to your AI agents by asking the right questions, setting up the right codes. And Sujay, I didn't mention it, but I'm actually writing a book on how to use AI in enterprise, like I haven't given the
Okay.
name yet, because that's the challenge. I saw that what happened with data is now happening with AI. Exactly the same pattern, but you need, just like data in AI, we need to be able to understand how to use it, have the right people do the right job, and then take the whole organization with themselves.
I think you're waiting when do we come to AI, right? We spent 40 minutes before coming to AI. So we were waiting when do we do that? That was very late too.
Yeah.
But Mrinal, I think with AI, do you see AI helping on the data topic as well? Your organizations, your customers are more enlightened. Okay, without data, we can't get success. So let's improve our level of maturity of data.
It's significant because, an AI is like a artificial intelligence, right? It's like almost like how a kid grows. The kind of knowledge you feed a kid on will determine how smart the kid becomes, how much knowledgeable, how productive it is. So again, you cannot have an advanced model but have a bad data.
Yeah.
It will not work out. You need to have a good data because the data is the teacher for the AI models. So I personally feel it's becoming more and clearer. Initially, there was a lot of hype when LLMs came in, but it is becoming more and more clearer that you want to get away from reports and have your AI agent give insights, but then you have to have the clean data in a way that the AI can understand. You need to have those structures that need to be there. A lot of people just try and say, okay, I'll throw the data to an AI agent, it'll give me all the answers. That's not true. It's an intelligent system. You need to talk to it intelligently.
Exactly. And even in the AI world, the models or the agents are not the differentiator. The differentiator is the data and the context that you feed to those models, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
and
absolutely right.
in the data world, we've always heard this term, right? Garbage in, garbage out. I'm
Yes.
hearing more and more this term garbage in, gospel out, which basically means
Okay.
if you give garbage, the AI will gospel, but it's going to hallucinate and gospel it confidently. It's even more dangerous than garbage in, garbage out.
It's far more dangerous. It's also because it's a toy in the hands of a lot of people who don't know how dangerous the toy is. So
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
start believing on whatever it does. If you set the role properly, the context properly, ask the right question, you put the right guide rails, an analyst can do what people who are 10 years, 15 years more senior to them weren't able to do earlier. But for that, you need to have the clean data, the right guidelines in place. And that's where I'm trying to write this thing to say, how do you use it? That's the question. Instead of what it is, how should it be used?
Maybe just a final point on the AI topic. Is your discussions with data leaders also changing with the AI topic? How do you see that? So if you're talking, let's say, to a data leader in an organization, how are you helping them strategically also prepare? Is there some different kinds of data you're asking them to capture? Because unstructured data is coming up a lot, for instance. So is there a change in the strategy with data leaders?
So I would say yes. I think a lot of people are still in very, especially a lot of leadership is not necessarily from a technology background or data background. So they are still a little early. I would say they're still lost, looking for us to guide them into what as to how they should look at it. But the question has become invariable. Like you cannot have a conversation with anybody in the C-suite without them asking how should they use AI or sharing with us how they are using AI. What is our opinion about it? It is becoming, and it will be like it's. I remember my analyst days. And we have another friend, and I should bring him up on this call. So, Sujay and I were very close to him. Once this tool came up, he gave me a call, and his first question was, "Oh, so now you're doing 500 people's work, right?" And, and just because of AI, it is a highly transformative technology. So it's changing the world, but it's going to go through its own journey. It's not going to happen overnight. But every CEO, every leadership person, in fact, has started asking the question, how do I use it?
Amazing. Really interesting conversation, Mrinal. I mean, we can go on for a lot more time, but I'm also cognizant of your time. So I'd like to end with a signature question, which we always ask our guests. So I would love your perspectives on it. Right? So if you were to personify data, I mean, it could be a friend, it could be a fictional character, it could be any kind of person you can think of. What would it be, and why as well?
That's a good question. See, I'm a chess player, so invariably my mind starts going there. But I would say it's somewhere between a grandmaster and a monk. Like that's
Wow.
how I would say the data. Like what they have in common is they can see things that you can't see. They have answers to a lot of questions that we all have. You need to be able to ask a question. You need to know at what stage of the game you are to be able to have that conversation with them. So you have someone who has the answers. The data sees everything. You can't hide your truth from the data. Like, so it sees the truth. What it needs to happen is to be able to ask the questions to the grandmaster who sees the game. And if you can do that, you'll win the game.
Very interesting, Mrinal. But at the same time, I don't want the C-suite to think that you need to be a grandmaster to play the data game, right? Because
No,
you
you
should
don't
be
have
able,
to. You don't. The data is the grandmaster. You need to ask the question.
right? Yeah, and then you get a lot of insights from it. Like just like
A lot
you
of
see
insights.
a piece in the chess puzzle which looks very complicated, but if you can ask the question, you find a simple answer to that.
Yeah. So if you look at a chess grandmaster, right, they see the patterns, they see the threat, the opportunities. They can see sometimes 15 moves ahead what is going to happen, right? But they're not sharing that information with everybody in the room voluntarily. That's the challenge with the data that you have. So if you ask them, if you engage them and have a discussion with them, then you don't necessarily need to know the answer. They'll provide you the answers to that. So treat them as a strategic asset in your arsenal. You have them, utilize the you don't have to become them, but utilize them. No, it's a great conversation, Sujay and Sid. This has been a journey for me. I think Sujay knows I was writing codes when everybody was studying. I used to spend more time on the computer lab than actually studying anything else. But I'm so excited with where data has come. It's been a journey where we had to explain to people why they should even build a report, to a stage where it's almost about this is how AI is going to transform. But the underlying data has always been the story. It's becoming apparent to almost everyone. It's an asset, and I'm very excited to see that.
Yeah. And Minal, on that topic, Sid and I, when we were writing the book, we have been brainstorming about this enterprise evolution. We thought, like, when it was enterprise 1.0, it's like two people, you deciding to run a company. And as the company grows, enterprise 2.0, you put in processes. That's where you become people plus process. And then as the companies grows, the processes evolve, you move to technology adoption, that is enterprise 3.0, people, process, and technology. And now I think we are at a time where you need to think of is data is our true differentiator. Everybody has the people, the process, the tech, and now we could say it is enterprise 4.0 era where it is people, process, tech, and data.
Very interesting, Mrinal. Also very interesting to hear and understand about Sarthi and how that's evolved, and also how you differentiate yourselves from the market. At least from this short conversation, I could easily understand how you are different as a guide, being a data driven first approach, and also helping enterprises, if I can use the phrase, compound their value, right? Because as you said very
Yes.
rightly, the more they work with you guys, the more they compound their value. And I think the same applies for data. The more I think enterprises, rather than using the justification word, the more enterprises invest in data, the more and use that data, that the more they will compound out of it from an enterprise value.
Yeah, I would say more talk to the data. I mean, I'll use more that
Yeah,
term that, the data is already there. It's part of your fabric of operating model. Don't think it as a foreign entity that you need to leverage and you need to justify. Just it's part of your existence, reason of your existence and reason of your differentiation.
that's a great point, Sujay. Maybe we should end it by thinking like, you should not be an introvert to a data. Like you're
Yeah.
not talking to the data. Be more
Yeah,
extroverted and talk to your data.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. I think the data is the introvert in this environment.
Yeah.
Make it an extrovert.
Ah, that's a good point as well.
Good point.
Thank you then for
So
the
really, thank
conversation.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sid. Thanks, Sujay. It was great catching up with you guys, and like all the best with your book. It's something that we all need. I think some people are aware, some people are not aware, but we all definitely need to remind like why data as a fourth pillar is balancing the people process technology framework here. So thanks for sharing that knowledge with all of us, and all the best.
Thank you, Minal, for joining. Thanks for your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Hi, Sid. So we had another interesting discussion today with Minal, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I liked with Mrinal or Sarthi is that they are the guide to enterprises, helping them to bring that data-driven insights in the decision making of their customers, and they are following those principles internally as well. So let's go to the key takeaways. My first key takeaway was when Mrinal himself talked about that data should be something that you need to go and talk to it. It's not just thinking it as a foreign entity and that must be leveraged. You need to bring it as part of the fabric of the organization and go and talk to your data. Like he said, your data that you have your customers is telling you a lot about your customers. So go and talk to the data and learn about your customers and thus provide higher value. Similarly for your employees. I really like this idea of go and talk to your data. That's a key message I would like to share with the boards and CXOs today through this podcast.
No, very, very true and very important point, Sujay, which kind of linked also to what I was my first key takeaway. Because he said, if you think of the three main challenges that C-suite leaders are facing today, why they don't see data as strategic as the other operating model pillars. And the first one he said linked to not talking enough to the data is the usage of the data. Right, so there's a lot of data collected, and more is going to be collected with the amounts that we are seeing our customers and enterprises collect. But unless you start talking to your point or using that data or activating that data, there's not going to be much value created out of it, which links to the second challenge that we're always looking at: what should be the ROI of data, how do you show the value, avoiding the justification game. But the more you activate the data, the more value and the opportunity, as Mrinal said it, you can get out of the data. And the third one was, of course, who's responsible, right? Just like we discussed for the other pillars, there's a clear responsible owner. Although for data, the ownership is more a service model, like we've discussed also with Rajiv in the last episode. But it requires still someone to set the structure in place, also get the adoption in place, and ensure the right standards are followed. Right? So I think very important points linked to what you said around talking, but also the broader aspect.
Yeah, yeah. Nice points brought out, Sid, and nice summary of those key takeaways. And with the ROI is always a top topic for everyone. What is the ROI for data? We had a good discussion. You should not think ROI from a justification perspective, but rather it is more of a proactive approach of data that you need to bring it rather than saying asking question, okay, is this why is how is data providing value to it? You do not ask it for your people, but you should not be thinking ROI or the investment from that perspective because data is your true differentiator. Yes, you need to understand the returns that you get from investment, but that should not become a defensive justification for you to invest into your data capabilities, your data operating model, the people that is needed, the processes that are needed. So I would say that is a key takeaway for enterprises to think ROI and the value not from a justification perspective.
No, very well said, Sujay. And I love that conversation you triggered in the podcast on this topic. And I think this is a very important one also for data leaders to do, right? Because I'm sure you have seen it, and I'm seeing it as well. A lot of times, what is happening with ROI is you maybe have already made an investment or you've requested a certain budget, and then it almost feels like you need to justify how exactly I have used this budget, right? So I think that coming out of that mentality is required, uh, and that requires a leadership change, right? Because otherwise the effect cascades to the rest of the enterprise as well. So very, very well said and good point. On that, I would say, I mean, my second key takeaway is how Mrinal explained how he set up Sarthi and how the culture there. Of course, we know from knowing Mrinal, and you know him, for a long time, that he's comes from a very data driven background, but still learning some of the patterns, how they've set up Sarthi, how they're going about it in a very data driven fashion from day one. I really enjoyed his observation about people and how the psychological aspect, again linking to Rajiv's episode last time, some of the examples he gave out, right? So people who plan their holidays more often than not are much more high performing individuals because they've probably planned their work as well very well. or other such patterns that he talked about in terms of how he goes about training, how he goes about ensuring he has a very high performing team. It's not just by luck or chance or gut instinct. He's really capturing the right data at an aggregated level to find the patterns from a C-suite and a co-founder level. I think that's a great insight for mid-market or SMB enterprises, how they can really change the game, not look at data as an afterthought. I think that was a great learning.
Yeah, and continuing to that, Minal also mentioned this example of this utility company wherein that company could improve its call pickup by the customers just by changing the time when they are called. And that was an insight they could derive through the data, right? And that's another example of talking to the data. And however, in addition, Sid, like you talked about the mentality change. So these data success should bring about a mentality change within the boards and the CXOs where they make it as a habit of the organization rather than trying to justify and bring about rules and policies to capture data or data quality that everybody talks about. This data way should become the way of working within the organization, and each success story should lead to the next one. Thus, it should become a habit that Minal talked about.
Yeah, very important takeaway indeed. And I guess that is the in my opinion the clear role of the data leader, right? To catalyze and become the change maker in a way to ensure that this success doesn't become like a one off or an odd thing, but then how that momentum can be gained to find the right next opportunity and create that process behind it, right? So very important point. So well said, Sujay. So my last takeaway is of course the signature question. I think the signature question comes with such great insights from every individual and so unique as well. So Mrinal's insights that he feels data is like a grandmaster, uh, or like a monk, but he kind of double clicked on the grandmaster aspect, which was very fascinating to see because a grandmaster, and he wanted to clarify that data is the grandmaster, right? Not that we are the grandmaster. I think that's an important distinction. All the information is already there in the chessboard, so that's all the captured data, but the data and the questions you ask the data triggers the activation on it to make sure that it finds the patterns, it finds the way for you to succeed as an enterprise to winning that board, right? However complex it is, right? So that's, I think, the a very good analogy to say that data is like a grandmaster, but it's very important to your first insight reflection as well, that we ask then the right question to the grandmaster so that he or she is able to solve the data puzzle in the enterprise.
Yeah, a good point, Sid. And that's why we wanted to bring about this personification question because data is so abstract. That's the difference I see. Data versus people. People we can feel and talk to, emotions are involved, but data, it's bits and bytes. We do not see, touch, and feel it. So, hence, the personification of data is very important, I feel. So, it's a very interesting question. And throughout all the episodes, we get important answers. I feel it also helps the boards and the CXOs, the listeners of the podcast, to personify data within their own organization to thus bring that culture change and make it as a habit for the organization.
Very true. Yeah. So yeah, really enjoyed the perspectives of everyone, including Mrinal, on that. So with that, I think we should conclude yet another great episode. I think Sujay and me are kind of like the catalysts or the change makers, but it requires the larger community. So appreciate all of you who've been part of listening or viewing the podcast till here. If you have any suggestions, please feel free to reach out to us, whether it's suggestions for improving the podcast, suggestions for guests you would like to see, or if you yourself want to be part of the podcast, please feel free to reach out to us. We really would love to hear your thoughts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And once again, thank you so much for all your efforts and time. So with that, we'll kind of conclude this episode. Thanks again, Sujay, as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sid. Thanks everyone for joining today. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.